Welcome back to It's Never Too Late. I'm Karen. I'm glad you're here. Today, I wanted to talk about something that's really personal to me. It's about retiring early. I retired at 53. I didn't really know what I was getting into, to be honest. You always think this is the finish line. This is what we all work towards. This will just be fantastic and so exciting. Such a relief. And it was all those things. But there are a lot of things that no one ever talks about. Kind of, your loss of identity, changes in friendships, all sorts of things. So I want to talk about that today. So if you're thinking about retiring, or maybe you have just retired, or maybe you've been retired a while and you can relate to this, stay tuned. I'd love to hear your experiences with retirement as well and kind of maybe what your expectations are going to be if you haven't retired yet. A little about my background, just so you kind of know where I'm coming from. I owned a real estate company for many years in Colorado. I was at the top of my game, to be honest, not to sound, like, well, look at me, aren't I terrific? But I was at the top of the game. Had been the number one agent for 15 years, doing very well, but it came at a really high price. My stress level was through the roof. I wasn't doing any favors for my health, for relationships. I had no hobbies. I was focused on my business. I was focused on my daughter, my husband. That was about it. That was it. There was no time for fun, anything like that, because those were my focuses. My daughter was going off to college. She had decided to go out of state. So I thought, you know what? She's going to be a plane ride away no matter what, no matter where we live. I knew if I continued on this path when she left, I would have even more time to work even longer hours because real estate can really consume you. The ironic thing is, many people say, I'm going to get into real estate so I can control my schedule. That is such a lie, such a lie. You are at the mercy of your clients. So if they decide they want to see a house on a Saturday morning and you have something planned, too bad, so sad, because they move on to someone else very easily. I hate to say that, but the majority of people do, even if you worked with them forever. They decide, oh, let's go look at the neighbor's house down the street, and they call you and they expect you to drop everything and come. Same thing with going out of town. It was very, very difficult for me to go out of town. The minute you leave town, someone who'd been taking a break for 6 months all of a sudden decides this is the time they have got to find a house to buy, or this is the time they're going to list their house, and they're not willing to wait a week while you're gone on vacation. Most of my vacations were spent in a hotel room with a laptop. I'm just being really honest. My phone became my enemy because it rang constantly, which is what you want when you're in that business. I was really burned out, to be very honest. I knew, again, if my daughter was leaving, I would just spend more time working. I didn't know if I'd survive it. I really didn't. I walked away from a ton of money. I walked away from a lot of years of income. People thought we were nuts. We did sell the business. And real estate's a tough business to sell, let me tell you that. I could not wait for the day that my phone didn't have to be by my side every single minute of every single day, because that was my business, was my phone. When we decided it was time, I knew I needed to leave Colorado because my business was so tied to that area just because of what it was, real estate. I could go into that for a long time, but I won't. We had lived in Arizona before. Our daughter had actually been born in Arizona, but she was raised in Colorado. We knew we wanted to go back to Arizona. We loved all the different seasons in Colorado until we didn't, because the snow became just kind of tiresome. Shoveling became really tiresome. The ice became tiresome. You kind of get the drift. Some people love it, and Colorado is gorgeous, don't get me wrong. But we said, no, we just don't want to deal with that any longer. So we decided to come back to Arizona. Now, we knew enough to know that we wanted to meet people in this new chapter. I did. I definitely wanted to meet people, have friends, have things to do, because I hadn't been able to do any of that. The way to do that, we thought, was to join a 55 plus neighborhood. We decided to build a home in a 55 plus neighborhood. My daughter's senior year in high school was spent cleaning out our house in Colorado, downsizing it, and building the home we're in now in Arizona. Getting ready to move from Colorado. We had almost a year to do that, which was really nice. She did not really care that we were moving. She was moving on in her mind to another state, to college. So it kind of worked out perfectly. we made the move. The day after she graduated, we had a big party for her. The next week, we were gone. We were gone. We were here in Arizona. It was a pretty quick thing, and we had a whirlwind summer because we were taking her to orientation. We were getting the house ready here. We were brand new to the neighborhood and 55 plus neighborhood. Wow, there's a lot to unpack there as well. So we just had a crazy, crazy summer. Then it kind of settled down. But what did I feel like initially when I retired? I still had my phone, but I now had people I could route those calls to. I agreed to be part of that company for a couple of years to kind of ease clients over to those folks and answer any questions they had. But it was nothing like the day to day grind, nothing like the day to day grind. We also had office space that we had leased and we couldn't break the lease. We subleased it to another company. We were still dealing with that for a couple of years as well. But, in the back of our mind, we had a good tenant there. You still aren't completely free from it all. When all of that happened, it was freeing, I have to say. It did provide me with a lot of freedom to know I don't have to have my phone next to me constantly. I'm not in the midst of these transactions negotiating everything from the price to is the refrigerator staying or not, or having buyers back out at the last minute, or sellers decide they don't want to sell at the last minute. Real estate's a very emotional thing. As I got older, it really weighed on me. It really did. I was trying to do the right thing. I know that sounds very Pollyanna, but I really prided myself on being very ethical and sometimes what can be a not so ethical business, to be honest. There are some fantastic agents out there, and I loved working with them. But there are some not so great agents as well. The bar to get into real estate is really low. So that wasn't fun. That was not fun. And clients weren't fun all the time either. They just weren't. I don't know how else to say it. I had some great clients that became friends, which I enjoyed. I loved that piece of it. In the end, it just wore on me. When I wasn't attached to my phone, there was a lot of freedom there. I loved it. However, one of the first things I noticed was my identity was so attached to real estate, to being a realtor. In Colorado, in our area, I was kind of known for that. My picture was on all my signs. I couldn't go to the grocery store without being stopped. I know that sounds kind of crazy, doesn't it? That's what you want as a real estate agent, but I wanted to be anonymous a lot of times. Then when you move to another state where no one really cares what you did, it's interesting. Your identity is totally gone. I remember being up at the pickleball courts. We were learning how to play pickleball. It was early on, early on. This was, almost 8 years ago. I asked the couple that was helping us, well, what did you guys do? They were retired. But I said, what did you used to do? I remember the wife just kind of did a double take, like, no one asks me this question. She had to think about it for a minute. She told me what they used to do. I went, okay. I just thought, wow, her whole life was retirement, which is great. I quickly learned that no one talks about what they used to do, something that you were engrossed in. You might have been in sales and you were selling mattresses. That was your life. Well, once you retire, you really don't talk about that with anyone because no one really cares. No one really cares. They care about what kind of person you are now. Are you fun to be with? Are you easy to get along with? Do you have things that are in common as far as interests go? That was probably the biggest change for me. I know that sounds kind of dumb, but my identity was so closely tied to what I did for a living that when that was removed, I was just kind of like, oh, I'm Karen. I'm just Karen. At the one side of the coin, it's very freeing. On the other side, you're kind of lost. I hope that makes sense. I also didn't realize how exhausted I had been, how it had just worn me out. I mean, I knew if I stayed on that path, it was not going to be a good path for me, which is why we retired early. And we were very fortunate we were able to do so. I didn't realize how exhausting it had been until I could really breathe. That was a big positive. I could focus on other things. It took me a while to get adjusted to that because I was used to working 24/7. What was interesting, moving to a 55 plus neighborhood, There were many opportunities to get involved, to lead up groups. I did it. But just because I was used to going, 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 I was also used to keeping the peace because you become the negotiator in a real estate deal and with clients. Sometimes you're getting them at their worst, the most stressful time in their life. And they don't realize that they cussed you out like a month ago. They forget about that. And you're all of a sudden the best thing since sliced bread. And you're sitting there thinking, but you just cussed me out a month ago. You're used to that. And I was just used to that intensity. I kind of channeled it into leading up groups, organizing things. Many times once you retire, you kind of lose the ability to even do email, to do the stuff you did on a daily basis. I didn't lose that because I was still doing things part time, which I'll tell you about in a second. So the tech piece of me was still there. So people latched onto that. It's like, oh, you can send out an email to 100 people? Oh, that'd be great. Or you know how to sign up a group of people for an activity and have them sign up for things that just were second nature to me. Once people retire, they kind of lose that ability to do it because they're not using it. So they loved it that I could bring that to the table. I did do a lot of that. And it was because I was in a 55 plus neighborhood, I think, because there are so many activities there and they're always looking for people to head up things. I've talked about that a lot. Don't fall for that. Don't fall for that because at this point now, but it's been 8 years, I'm almost out of everything now. I'm almost relieving myself of heading up anything because sometimes it just becomes too much with a group of retirees. So that was something I didn't realize I would do because I was trying to fill that void of being so busy. I was being busy now with things I didn't get paid for, but hopefully things that I enjoyed. I met a lot of people, which was great doing that. You deal with a lot of complaints for nothing, nothing. People don't see that that's what's going on behind the scenes. I was still sort of working because I also did a lot of coaching of agents and I could do that from anywhere in the country. As long as there was a camera and a laptop, I started creating some classes just for real estate agents. I had written a book for real estate agents. It's still out there on Amazon and does pretty well, just about how I was able to be successful at real estate. No one but real estate agents would be interested in that. I was still had my fingers in, so to speak. Of course, what happens? I'm doing all this kind of stuff and I think, I'm looking around at what's happening in the neighborhood with real estate because it's in my blood. I decide I'm going to get my broker's license in Arizona. What was I thinking? I did that and I started doing business here. I was just going to do it every now and then. Famous last words. Within 6 months, I basically started making what I had made in Colorado. So, I mean, I hadn't lost it in 6 months. That's great, right? I hadn't lost it. That was a good feeling. At the same time, I was bringing back all the stress again. In a retirement community, when I was really focused on doing business here, holy cow, when I was not retired, I would always say retirees are some of the most difficult clients. I could say that now because I'm in that category because they have a lot of time on their hands. They're always analyzing things. They're thinking about why didn't we get a showing now? The house down the street got a showing. Why didn't our house? And you get a phone call. Well, I was doing that full force, but they were my neighbors. They were friends. It also became stressful. I was like, what are you doing, Karen? So I kind of backed away from that quickly. Basically, what I'm trying to say is there was a lot of ebb and flow. There was a lot of trying things out that didn't work and backing away. I was trying to feel my way, trying to find my identity, I think, in this new retirement world. When you are in your early 50s and you go places outside of the 55 plus neighborhood, you're often asked, what do you do? I could be getting my nails done. What do you do? Oh, I'm retired. Really? Then you'd be asked how old you are, and they'd be saying, how did you retire that young? It's kind of funny. People are always interested in how you did that. When you are in the 55 plus neighborhood and you're 53, at the time, people say, you're a baby, which made you feel great, right? They couldn't believe we retired so young and they wanted to know what we did and how we did that. There are lots of questions at how you retired early. I didn't expect that. I think because I would never ask someone those questions myself. I just say they made that decision and they were able to do it. So that's great. When I went back to working in real estate, it wasn't about the money. It was for something to do. And just to kind of validate what I did before, I think, looking back. It was great that I made a lot of money doing it again. Again, it validated to me why I was getting out of that, why I didn't want that grind any longer. I kept trying to figure out what's a good balance between staying busy and not working. A lot of people do go back to work part-time, but they do something maybe they enjoy. A lot of people will volunteer to have something to do, but something meaningful for them to do. I think that's the key. You have to find what fills your bucket, what fills your heart, so to speak. It has taken me some time to figure that out. You lose your sense of purpose. On top of my career, my daughter wasn't around. We were very close, but she was in another state, living her life, spreading her wings, which is what you want as a parent. But she wasn't around every day like she was before. You become an empty nester as well. That was a weird feeling. We were kind of dealing with that and dealing with retirement and dealing with moving to another state all at the same time. I thought, my career was what I was. Raising my daughter was what I was. But retirement showed me that was just what I did. And many people in retirement have adult kids. You talk about them occasionally, but they're not the center of the conversation like they are when they're growing up. Like Susie's playing basketball or Tommy is in the orchestra at the high school. You don't really talk about that as much. Occasionally you do because you want to know what's going on with their lives. It's not the focus. It's not the focus at all. It's quite interesting. My relationship with money was quite interesting. It totally changed because you don't have income coming in on a regular basis. This wasn't as hard as maybe it is for a lot of people who have, a paycheck every couple of weeks. In real estate, I'm sure it's commission only. You have to be selling in order to make something. There could be months where some people don't make anything, and there could be other months where it is, feast or famine, so to speak. I was used to not being on a regular schedule, so to speak, of income coming in. None of that was coming through anymore because there were no big checks coming in. Your money changes, your concept of money. You're relying on living on maybe investments, whatever you decided to do, how to structure your financial life. That was quite a bit different. Before we were doing well financially, I'm very lucky to say that. But so if we needed to spend money on a vacation, we did. Things change in retirement because you don't have that income every 2 weeks coming in. So you have to think about things. Health insurance. Oh my goodness. Health insurance. Oh my gosh. Now we're in a little bit of a different boat than a lot of retirees because when you retired, especially if you retire early, maybe you've been on an employer sponsored plan. You are now being thrown out there into the maybe Affordable Care Act. You're just out there with everyone else. We had been in that world for oh gosh, for years and years and years and years before the Affordable Care Act even. In Colorado, it became more and more expensive, but the coverage was not horrible. I learned quickly in Arizona, the coverage was quite a bit different and it was not as great as Colorado, but it was incredibly expensive. As the years have gone by, the coverage has become worse and the expenses have become higher. This year alone, now a lot happened this past year politically, and I don't want this to become a political thing, but we were going to have to pay $30,000 a year for two of us to have horrible coverage, like a 9,000 something dollar deductible through the Affordable Care Act. When you're retired, that's a lot. That's a lot. So you have to consider your health insurance. What are your costs going to be just for insurance, much less if you have a health issue? So that has changed quite a bit. We always knew we would have to deal with health insurance. And we didn't think it would be a big deal because that's what we've been doing, as I said. It has become a big deal now just because of the cost of it. The other thing that I probably didn't think about, I wanted to make some friends. I had thought about that. But, when you're 24/7 in a career, it's hard to make good, long lasting friends. I thought, I'm going to do that here at the 55 plus neighborhood. You meet people constantly and people are very social and it can be so much fun. When we first moved here, it was a blast. We were doing so much. Well, we went overboard because we hadn't had that. We were participating in everything and we've made some friends that are still friends with us today. We would see people moving in because this was a brand new neighborhood at that time. We would see people moving in and they would do the same thing we were doing. They would go on vacation with people they just met like a month ago And now those relationships are broken up. They're no longer friends, which is kind of interesting. You find that you have to slow down. You cannot continue at that pace. And not everyone is a good friend. A lot of friends are friends of convenience. It really hit hard for me recently because I talked about this a little bit in the last couple of videos on my YouTube, not on podcasts, but we were broken into a few weeks ago. And it was traumatizing. It would be for anyone, I think. People knew about it because I talked about it on the neighborhood Facebook group, which, oh my goodness. Can you imagine a 55 plus neighborhood Facebook group? Yeah, it's everything you imagine. But I put it on there because I said, I'm not going to live with myself if something happens to someone else because we didn't warn people that this had happened to us. I put that on there. My friends saw that. I wasn't texting everyone telling them this was going on, but they saw it. To this day, no one has reached out to us to say, how are you doing? I bet that was traumatizing. No one has. I Part of me knows half of the people just want to pretend it didn't happen because it had not happened before in this neighborhood. They don't want to think that because they might have to take some action, with their own security because it's pretty lax in this neighborhood. They admit that. But the other half, I think I'm a convenient friend. It's just like, oh, if we see her, we'll ask her about it. Where I wouldn't do that. I would be talking to my friend saying, I bet that was a tough situation. How are you guys doing? Or any news or that kind of thing. That became really clear to me. Yeah, we have a lot of convenient friends. If we didn't live in the neighborhood, I don't know if we'd be friends unless we tried to maintain that friendship. Your friendships change. We went from not having a ton of friends in Colorado to having what we thought was a ton of friends here. Then you really nail down, are they true friends or not? I don't know. I don't know. It's a question mark. That's something I'm going through right now. I am trying to kind of distance myself from some things and also really trying to develop strong relationships, not with a ton of people, with a few kind of like-minded friends, but I'm not saying they have to believe everything I believe because that sometimes is the most interesting type of friendship, right? You're very different, but you get along. I'm very open to that, but I don't know. It's just been eye-opening. I hope this is not sounding just like I'm babbling here, but it's hard. It's hard, especially as you get older, because you don't have that built-in work where you made some friends there. You don't have the built-in kid connection where you meet other parents. That's why we moved to 55 plus, because we thought we could meet people here. It'd be easier to meet people here. It is so much easier to meet people here. It's very easy to make convenience friends and not real friends. I think in a nutshell, what I would say is retirement has given me freedom to make choices. I didn't have that before. I thought I did because I had my own business, but I really didn't. I can now make choices where I want to live, what friends I want to have, what I want to be involved in, what interests me. I didn't have that freedom before. The older I'm getting, the more I'm appreciating that. I'm kind of reinventing my life. I'm 60 years old. I'm going to be 61 next month. I'm reinventing this chapter. It feels really good that I'm creating it. I think some people wouldn't do this. They would just kind of stay with the status quo. Yeah. I told my husband the other day, I don't want to feel like we're just waiting to die. I know that's very morbid, but when you're just watching TV every day or you're doing the same thing day in, day out, some people that it sounds like a dream. I want to live life. I'm kind of in this third chapter, fourth chapter. I don't know what chapter. I know it's not one of the early ones. I have more years behind me than I have ahead. And I want to make the best of it. I want to make the most of it. We're not guaranteed anything. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. I also hear a lot of times your 60s are your go-go years. Your 70s are your slow-go years. And your 80s are your no-go years. I want to make the most of my go-go years, as they say. That's why I started this podcast. That's why I started my YouTube channel. It's early on with both, but I'm having a blast and it's feeling very authentic to me. I'm connecting with other people in my age range going through the same things. I love that. It's giving me a purpose. And I'm hopeful that people will follow along on my journey because they're on the same journey as well. They may be early on in the journey. They may be meeting me right where I am, or they may be later on in the journey. They have things to share as well. I love hearing about those experiences. Retirement overall, I can say it's great, but it's not what I expected. Now I am finally 7 years later learning that it's a work in progress. It's a work in progress. I don't want to look back at my 60s and say, gosh, those were wasted years. Because when you're 60, you wish you were 50, and 50, you wish you were 40, or whatever. I don't think that way. But at 70, I don't want to say, boy, I wish I could relive my 60s because I could have done a lot more then. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to have any regrets over my years being 60. I talked about my work years. I don't regret that. It allowed us to do a lot of things. It allowed me to be sitting here doing this right now because I work so hard. I'm very proud of myself that I realized it and I stopped before it basically killed me. I'm very proud that I'm sitting here and I'm figuring out what kind of person I want to be. What do I want to be doing on a day to day basis? How do I fill my cup? How can I help others along the way? I've realized that retirement's not an ending, it's kind of a reset for your life. It's a gift. It truly is a gift because you're able to figure out what you want to do, what's going to give you purpose. The whole process can be a little bit uneasy, uncomfortable if you lean into it like I'm doing. Not everyone goes through this. I have to say, we're all different. You might be watching this saying, I'm not going to go through that. And you may not. When I was 53, I didn't think I'd be going through this. Now, 7 years later, I can say, yeah, I can see now why I'm at the spot I'm at. I'm I'm grateful that I'm here and that I have the ability to kind of reinvent myself. If you're approaching retirement, what do you think retirement's going to be like? If you're in retirement, what surprised you the most? Anything? I'd love to hear from you. I hope this has given you something to think about. Remember, it's never too late to create a life that you love. I hope to see you next time. Stay with me. Watch the video if you'd like on YouTube. Follow me on my socials. I'm always posting there with something going on. Thanks for listening.